I'm going to give you 5 ways that you can use your hybrid out on the golf course, and stay tuned for number 4 and 5 because they will be game changers. Let's take a look at the first one. So tip number 1 is all to do with using your hybrid on the teeing ground. It's probably a club that you rely on if your driver or 3-wood works, but I see a few errors that people are making that means that they're not going to get the most out of it. Number 1 is all to do with tee height. If we look at how I've pegged this one up, I see people pegging their hybrids up like they would do maybe a driver and a hybrid. The big problem with that is that if you do connect with the ball off a tee that is that high, you're probably going to be hitting the club round about here on the top line, somewhere around there is where we want to get it more out of the center. So when we talk about tee height, we want to try and make sure that the ball is just hovering above the ground there, just so if we were to strike it, you're going to get more of the center of the golf club. Secondly is all to do about your setup. What I see a lot of people doing, because they're relying on it to be the club that's replaced driver or 3-wood, they still adopt the same stance. So we see something where the ball gets too far forward in the stance, maybe off the front foot, and we see too much lean in the spine when we're actually stood to it. We don't want to be doing that. What we want to try and do is just make sure that we've got that correct tee height. Make sure now that the ball is about 1 ball outside, or inside, sorry, inside that lead foot there. We can see that that ball is nicely lined up there. From there then, I'm going to get a tiny tilt, because all I'm trying to do is just sweep the tee. I'm not trying to hit up on it massively like I would do with a driver. I want to try and have a pretty level attack. So make sure that we've not got it pegged up too high and we're not addressing it like a driver. Get that ball position just back behind the lead foot. Just get that little sweep, and we'll see that we get the hybrid in play off the tee. Let's go and have a look at another one. Another use for using your hybrid is all off the fairway. Probably a club that if you're maybe a higher handicap or a senior golfer, you use it on par 4s for your second shots majority of the time, maybe on par 5s for a shot, but it's one that will probably be playing off the fairways quite a lot. And what I see with people here, because it's that mix of the iron and the hybrid, we sort of get confused as to whether we're trying to take a divot or not, and I see a lot of people thinning them, topping them, and not getting the most out of it. And that's all because we're not getting our angle of attack right. And what I mean by that is, are we getting the ground and then the ball, or are we getting the ball then the ground? What we want to try and do is get ball then ground. We want to get a little divot. Real simple thing, and I did a lesson on this years ago, which is one of the big videos on the channel. But if you were to just place a tee in here, that's about the club head width apart from the ball and the actual tee peg there. What we'll then be able to do is give ourselves a little bit of direction as to where we want to try and hit and get the club bottoming out. What I don't want to see, if I had another tee that was back here, I wouldn't want to feel that the club was touching the ground there and then raising up over the golf ball, causing that thin over the top. What I'm trying to do is get the club to bottom out just after the tee peg. So a real simple way, and what I want you to try and feel in some practice swings, if you've got your ball and then your tee peg just placed in front, what I want you to try and now feel is that if the zipper line on my jacket, as I'm coming in to hit it, I want to try and feel I've almost got it moving on top of the tee peg now. So what that will mean is that that club will bottom out where my zipper line is. If I get it moving back behind the golf ball, that's going to be where we're going to get bottomed out, and we don't want that. So real simple, couple of practice swings. That tee peg's about a club head in front of the golf ball. Really smooth and slow. Just feel that zipper line moving over the tee peg, and you'll notice these little brushes I'm getting on the turf now are all actually coming after the golf ball. If we can do that then with a good setup and just have the same feeling of just trying to bottom out and almost trying to feel that if you are on the practice ground or wherever you're doing this, you're just going to try and clip the tee peg as well as actually hitting the golf ball, and we should see we get a nice ball then turf strike. Oh, it's the best hybrid I've hit in ages. Absolutely brilliant. And if you come in close here for me and just have a quick look at this one, this is where my golf ball was, just round about here, and afterwards we can now see the divots appeared after where the golf ball was, and my T-pegs actually popped up out of the ground. So that is a nice simple way to crush that little hybrid off the fairway. Let's go and take another look at a use for your hybrid. Sorry to interrupt your lesson, guys. If you are enjoying it though, do remember it's free to subscribe, give it a little click down there, and also leave us a comment on a scenario that you're struggling with out on the golf course, and we'll pick one and put it in one of the next lessons. Let's get back into this lesson. So another use for your hybrid club is actually probably what some other people refer them to as a rescue club, and that's when you get in a situation like this where, as we look up now, we can see the green in the distance, but it's probably a shot where it's very high risk for me to go for it. But we can see out this way now, I've actually got a line back out to the fairway and nothing really in front of me. I've got to cover quite a bit of distance because I want to try and get it up to the green as close as possible, but I don't want to bite too much off. The only issue here is this little canopy of the tree that's hanging down. So with this hybrid here only having 19 degrees of loft on it, what I'm able to do is actually almost adopt it like a small little chipping stance, where now what I would try and do is make my stance a little bit smaller, and then I would almost make like a little arm swing, and this is just going to get that initial little bit of lift, and then it's going to get it up over the rough that I can see. I've probably got about 20 yards of rough, but I'm actually trying to hit this about 90 to 100 yards up into the distance. So it's a club that if you were struggling, maybe you were thinking, oh, 6-7 iron, 5 iron's going to get up a little bit too quick. If you were to just adopt the small swing, you can then actually pop it out, get the initial carry over the rough, and it's going to start to run out towards your desired target down the fairway. So a couple of things just to try and remember when you do play this one. Get the ball a little bit more back in the stance, a little bit more middle to back. We don't want it up near the front where we would play it if we were playing our normal shots. We're going to make our stance a little bit smaller as well. We're going to grip down the golf club. We don't need the full length of it. I'm also stood ever so slightly closer here because everything I'm trying to do, for me this is a club that goes about 230 yards, but I only want to hit it about 90 yards, but I'm only using this to keep it flat and low under this tree. So my smaller stance, shorter club is just going to get me a little less distance as I go through. So small little arm swings with this smaller adopted stance, and we should see that you're able to pop it out and get back into play. And there we go, carries up onto the fairway and it's trundling up into the distance, and it's a great club, that rescue club, for in situations like that where you need to keep it low but you want to get it running back up towards the green or back up to fairways or back into play. Let's go and take a look at another one. Not the shot I wanted there. I was scared, I was nervous, and I've ended up thinning it across the green, and probably we get the other one where I duff it, and basically all because I can see a bunker here. I might have to float it up a little bit. I get nervous and I just don't chip how I know I can, but that's where your hybrid can come into play. They're a great little nerve settler, I would say. If you're really struggling with your chipping, you don't like hitting the ones that are going to go up in the air, it's one that's going to give you an initial little pop. Almost use it a bit like a putter stroke, and you can start to hit some decent shots. One thing I would bear in mind with it though, you might have to maybe err a little bit away from where you would do if you had a lob wedge in hand, because you're not going to get that elevation. You might not be able to go over certain humps and swales. Here I almost need to go over the corner of this rough and the little swale that we've got, so I'm just going to go on the slight inside, which means I maybe have a 6-foot putt instead of a 3-foot putt if I hit a good one, but that's better than duffing and thinning it. Only a couple of real simple things we need to do when we do this, a bit like chipping it out of the trees. We're going to go right down to the bottom of the grip, almost touching the graphite on the club here. From there then, I'm going to make sure as I stand to the golf ball, I'm a lot more upright. What I don't want to be doing is adopting my normal posture like I would do if I was hitting it off the tee or the fairway. Reason for this is because as I stand now more upright, the club's going to go more upright, and then what I'm able to do is make my putter-like stroke here. The actual loft on the club, the 19 degrees of loft that I've got on here, is going to do that initial lift, and then it's all going to roll like my putter. So I'm going to play this in the middle of my stance here. I'm going to adopt my putting stance, the width that I would stand when I've got my putter, and all I'll do then from here, once I've got that upright setup, is simply just have a few little practice swings, feeling that putter motion. What you'll probably notice is actually that the toe of the golf club is actually rubbing the ground a little bit more because it's not sat on its normal base. It'll be a little bit more toey as you do this. And now simply just try and make that small little putting stroke, and it just pops out and runs up. And even that, I've not quite got it there. I went maybe a little bit too close to the fringe. Is actually better than the thin chip shot. And all I'll say as well on this one is that it takes a little bit of practice with this club. It's one that you're used to maybe making full swings with. So it's having the confidence and having the feel to actually be able to make those small swings and trust it's not going to go shooting out. And we'll start to see that you're actually able to hit some pretty decent shots like that one, which will actually hold the nerves in and get you safely on the green when you're very close to it. Take a look at the fifth and the final one. So the fifth and final way to use your hybrid is in a situation like this, where I find my golf ball up against the collar of rough just off the fringe grass. Now, you'll get some scenarios depending on where you're playing where this cut will be really defined and really thick, and it's a really horrible shot because you think, well, I can't quite get my wedge onto it, it's going to snag, it's going to grab it, it's going to end up me chunking it. My putter, I just feel like it's going too low and grabbing. As where with our hybrid now, what we're able to do, again, when we adopt our small little stance with this one, I would be feet together, it's just a club that can just brush through this scenario really quick. And again, very much like the putting and chipping stroke, we want to make everything a little bit smaller. We want to try and get down the grip. And all we're going to do for this one, I just like to lean a little bit more extra weight towards the target, just so I get a tiny bit steeper on it. And even on these small ones here, when I am close to the flag, even when it's caught up in this sort of tangly scenario, I'm able just to make this small stance now, lean towards the target, grip down on it. But what it'll allow me to do, the sole of the golf club will just ride through the turf a little bit better, and I can just pop it off and not get tangled up. So small stance, lean that weight about 70-60% towards the target, grip down, and then just a little small rock. And I felt my club get tangled in the rough there, but we can see it's just popped out and made a nice little shot, one that was quite difficult, pretty easy to use. So this is one that you'll need a lot of experimenting with, because you'll think that a small swing isn't going to pop it out, but it just cuts through this thicker rough, lifts it slightly and lets it just trickle out towards your target. So that's 5 ways to use your hybrid, guys. Remember, subscribe for more free lessons and leave us a comment on a scenario you're struggling with, and we'll see you in your next lesson.